Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about the Ultimate Spider-Man episode, Ultimate Deadpool. Now, Deadpool is a character that I've been a fan of for quite a long time, and I gotta say, this is a really nice realization of Deadpool as a character. And it's also a very fitting time for this episode to air, seeing as how the Deadpool game came out just last week, I believe it was, or 2 weeks ago. Of course, we're looking at two very different interpretations of Deadpool there. Ultimate Spider-Man is, of course, aimed at kids, and the Deadpool game is, well, it has that rated M logo for a reason on there. A very fun game, very much Deadpool, but definitely not one for the kiddies. Deadpool uses a little bit of saucy language, and it's somewhat violent. And, he full-on K-words many people. But anyway, as I said, this is a really nice realization of Deadpool, and one of the reasons for that is, of course, that one of the guys at Man of Action, one of the writers of this episode, of course, the creators of the show, is Joe Kelly, and he's basically a guy who back in the late 90s really sort of took Deadpool from being a kind of a cult character in the Marvel Universe, and through about a 25-issue run of a Deadpool series that he was the writer of, really brought the character into the mainstream Marvel Universe, won Deadpool a lot, and I mean a lot of new fans, including me, and really just sort of propelled the character to the absolute next level. And now he's got his own game. He was a character in like Marvel vs. Capcom 3, so Deadpool really took off because of the efforts of Joe Kelly. And of course there were a lot of good people who came on and worked with Deadpool later on, but Joe Kelly was really the guy who kicked things up to a notch. So knowing that he had a hand in this episode, it really does make a lot of sense, because you could definitely see some nods to Deadpool history over the years, and a lot of the trademark Deadpool humor, while certainly toned down from the comics, is very much present. Just for example, the fact that the whole thing is blamed on Agent MacGuffin. Well, if you're not familiar with it, MacGuffin is just sort of a showbiz term for a plot device. For here it's the secret stuff that somebody stole from S.H.I.E.L.D. It's stuff that's not actually important. It's just a reason for the plot to happen, for the plot to move along. That's called a MacGuffin. And as I was saying, you can definitely see some nods to older Deadpool stories here, especially in his interactions with Spider-Man. Joe Kelly is also a guy who's written quite a lot of Spider-Man. He's written quite a bit of very good Spider-Man. And his battle with Deadpool at the end, of using just sort of crazy humor and weird breaking the fourth wall stuff, that's very reminiscent in my mind of the rather infamous Spider-Man versus Deadpool Yo Mama battle from the comics. And yes, Spider-Man and Deadpool, in a story written by Joe Kelly, did have a Yo Mama contest. And Deadpool actually won that one. Quite handily, in fact. And of course, we also saw some nods to some other stories from Deadpool over the years. We see him, once again, just like in the comics, being able to use the power of breakdancing to completely and utterly pwn Taskmaster. In fact, that was one of the things he did in, it was either the second or third issue of the Joe Kelly Deadpool run, and that was one of the ones where it really crystallized for me just how awesome Deadpool could be. And even with that little scene of Deadpool as Captain Ahab and Spider-Man as Moby Dick, this is a nod to a story called, I kid you not, Deadpool Killustrated, which was sort of Deadpool kind of lampooning classic literature, including things like Moby Dick. And again, I'm not joking, this is something that Marvel actually published. Now, as I said, Deadpool is significantly toned down here in this version. The whole little thing with him going on about the K word and then Spider-Man actually being able to go out and say the word kill, I found that pretty hilarious, especially since I kind of come from the time of the 90s Spider-Man cartoon when words like death and kill simply were not allowed on television, and guns couldn't even fire real bullets. There was a infamous scene in one of the Spider-Man cartoons, the Spider-Man cartoon of that time, where some cops have mistaken Spider-Man for a bad guy, just regular New York City cops. They pull out their guns and start shooting him, and for some reason, their guns fire lasers. Again, ordinary beat cops in New York, for some reason, can have laser guns. I mean, it was really just completely ridiculous. Now, there are some things that I do kind of have a quibble with, and that the whole idea of, like the Amazing Friends just like absolutely thinking that Deadpool is the greatest guy ever and all this other blah 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 blah. Again, that just felt really weak and tacked on. It's just like, okay, let's kick Spider-Man in the butt once more for no really discernible reason. I mean, as a storytelling element, it just doesn't really work. And honestly, you kind of have to wonder why some of the more serious people like Iron Fist and White Tiger would think Deadpool is so great. I mean, Deadpool here is basically just sort of Spider-Man on... It's like Spider-Man on crank. But they're totally cool with him. Yeah, it really just does not make sense. And the idea of portraying Deadpool as sort of a darker reflection of Spider-Man, what he potentially could have been if he didn't have the good guidance of Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Well, that certainly did have storytelling potential. I mean, they were able to certainly find a really strong character parallel between Spider-Man and the Hulk not that long ago. But really, it just flashes by so briefly, we don't really have the time to go anywhere with it. And while we do get a brief glimpse of what might be Deadpool's possible origin. In fact, Deadpool's actual origin in the comics is very unclear. Long story short, there are basically two versions of it, and even Deadpool doesn't know which one is true. So again, they really did have the potential to do something like that, do something with that in terms of characterization and storytelling, but they just didn't. Now, again, as I've said, this is a really nicely realized version of Deadpool. Of course, this is an interpretation that leans much more towards Deadpool's villainous side. Deadpool is a character that really can be morally ambiguous in many ways. There are times when he's been portrayed as being a villain. There are times when he's been genuinely very heroic. In fact, I like how this episode does keep in tune with Deadpool, that he's basically heroic or villainous as it strikes him, as what he thinks is just going to be the most fun at the time, or heavily what's going on with him at the time, the company he keeps. And generally, if he tends to hang around more heroic characters like, say, Cable or Siren, then Deadpool, he generally does a little bit better job of being on the side of the angels. If he's around more morally ambiguous characters like, say, Outlaw, well, that's a little bit more But anyway, as I've said, this is a really nicely done, generally speaking, take on Deadpool. I certainly had a lot of fun listening to his banter and watching him just kind of go nuts. And it was certainly nice to see those nods to the older Deadpool stories and see the classic sort of Joe Kelly Deadpool shining through here and there. So this episode, if you're a Deadpool fan, is quite the treat. Now, it does not to say that it doesn't have its flaws in terms of storytelling, but it certainly is a fun watch. You can definitely say that. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for you this time. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.